You think a road that knit an empire together would begin with the calm of dawn, marble catching first light, merchants rolling carts, soldiers shifting into their morning watch. But reality reveals what Rome truly wanted every traveler to witness. 6,000 crosses, aligned like a silent army of the condemned, bodies sagging into the day. And if this makes you want to turn away, let the memory continue. Those who hung here weren't allowed that mercy. The smell reaches you before the sight, not the rot of old death, fresh blood, metallic and warm, mixing with morning dew as if the air itself has been forced to swallow it. Then the sound, shallow, cracking breaths, multiplied by thousands. Above them, crows circle in slow, patient spirals, as if they've been summoned rather than drawn by hunger. Rome doesn't need guards here. Despair does the job perfectly. But what freezes you isn't the dying. It's the living. A merchant passes, adjusting the fold of his toga, careful not to brush dust from the bodies. A mother pulls her child closer, not out of fear, but to keep the walk shorter. Children play at the base of a cross as if it were a tree. No screams, no horror, because this is normal. We hold the facts as they are. 71 B.C. Spartacus defeated, 6,000 slaves crucified along the Appian Way. But the unrecorded 40% lives in the atmosphere. The way Rome turned human suffering into infrastructure. The way silence became policy. These men weren't executed. Execution would have been mercy. They were arranged, displayed, integrated into the landscape like warnings carved out of flesh. Rome wasn't just punishing rebellion. It was teaching a lesson. Oppose us, and we will make your death a spectacle others must walk through. If you believe moments like this must be remembered, stay. Because what comes next is where history tightens its grip. You think Rome's power came from its legions, iron discipline, perfect formations, unstoppable expansion. But the truth is far more unsettling. Armies win battles. Systems control empires. And Rome built a system where humiliation wasn't an accident of cruelty, it was policy. If realizing that makes you pause, don't look away. Memory only matters when it's uncomfortable. Rome was not the marble postcard we inherited from Hollywood. It was a machine, 50 million people spread across 3 continents, bound together not by constant surveillance or modern communication, but by something colder, psychological engineering. For 100 amphitheaters, not for entertainment, but for instruction. Every spectacle a reminder of who held power and how humans could be unmade in public if they violated the order Rome imagined for them. This is the 60% history, laws defining who could be degraded, when, and why. Legal categories of shame, mechanisms to strip identity before life. Before the crowd saw blood, Rome dismantled the person, status erased, clothing replaced, dignity assigned a market value. Vendors, performers, politicians profited from it. Humiliation wasn't a side effect. It was an industry. And here is the 40% Rome did not record. The texture of the crowd's anticipation. The way silence falls before a sentence is read. The emotional choreography of watching another human being offered up like a civic ritual. Cicero wrote that shared degradation created unity. Seneca argued that witnessing suffering made citizens obedient. Imagine believing that. Imagine teaching it. This wasn't barbarism from the fringes. It was philosophy from the center. Rome convinced itself that cruelty could be civically productive, morally useful, socially strengthening. They documented humiliation with the same precision they applied to aqueducts, engineering degradation the way they engineered water. If you feel a chill here, keep it. Because the people you're about to meet, Perpetua, Vercingetorix, Sejanus, didn't just fall into Rome's machinery. They were processed by it. And what happened to them reveals how an empire maintains control long after swords are sheathed. You think Rome feared armies, rebels, kings who could rally thousands. But the truth is far quieter, far more intimate. Rome feared conviction. A single person who would not bend. And if that unsettles you, don't turn away. Stories like hers only breathe when someone is willing to face them. Perpetua was 22, wealthy, educated, a new mother nursing an infant who still couldn't survive without her. In every metric Rome cared about, she had everything to lose. And Rome knew that. That's why the empire didn't come at her with whips or flames. It came for the part of her identity most likely to break her, her motherhood. If you feel the weight of that strategy, let it stay with you, because this is how power thinks. The historical 60% remains unaltered. Carthage, 203 CE. Christianity wasn't dangerous for its theology. It was dangerous because its followers refused a 5-second ritual, burning incense to the emperor's image. A symbolic gesture of loyalty Rome demanded from every subject. Perpetua refused. Again and again. Her diary, one of the earliest surviving Christian texts written by a woman, preserves what Rome tried to erase. She writes of her father visiting the prison, hands trembling as he kissed hers. He pleaded with her not as a Roman official, but as a parent cracking under terror. Have pity on your child, who cannot live without you. The guards brought her baby to her, let her nurse him, then took him away, over and over. Rome didn't need iron to torture her. Repetition did the work. Choice did the work. And here is the 40% that lives between the lines. Imagine the cell, humid with the smell of bodies, the muffled echoes of other prisoners. Perpetua's heartbeat spiking each time footsteps approached, wondering if it was her child again, or if the next offer of mercy would be her last. Rome didn't need monsters. It only needed procedure. On the night before her execution, she wrote of a vision, a bronze ladder lined with blades, beasts at its base, paradise at its peak. She thought she would face the devil. She was wrong. She would face something far more deliberate, an empire that believed breaking a mother in public could strengthen society. If you believe sacrifice should mean something, stay. Because what Rome set in motion next wasn't just punishment. It was design. And the way they chose to destroy her reveals exactly what they feared most. You think Rome crushed kings with brute force, legions marching, steel clashing, the roar of conquest. But the truth is that Rome preferred to break its enemies slowly, deliberately, with a patience only empires possess. And if that realization tightens something in your chest, keep listening. What happened to him wasn't a defeat. It was a dismantling. Vercingetorix was 30, a warrior king whose very name meant great leader of warriors. The man who did the impossible, united fractious Gallic tribes, turned forests into fortresses, scorched fields to starve Caesar's ambition. In the 60% we preserve from history, he nearly won. At Gergovia, he handed Caesar one of the worst defeats of his career. For a moment, just a moment, Gaul stood on the edge of independence. But Rome was built not on victories alone, but on spectacle. And when Alesia fell, Vercingetorix chose to end the siege not with a final battle, but with an act of defiant dignity. He rode out alone, wearing ceremonial armor, gleaming under a gray sky. Caesar himself records it, the king circling the Roman tribunal, disarming, then lowering himself at Caesar's feet, motionless, silent. A surrender not of weakness, but of responsibility. A man offering himself to save thousands. And that is exactly why Caesar didn't kill him. Here begins the 40% Rome never wrote down, the strategy behind the cruelty. Caesar understood anticipation. 6 years in a stone pit beneath Rome, the Tullianum, not as a prisoner, but as a prop. The city whispered about the enemy king buried alive under their feet, his legend fermenting, his humiliation aging like wine for the triumph Caesar was already imagining. 6 years in darkness. No sun, no seasons. A hole beneath the empire he once challenged. Not executed, not absolved, simply waiting. You'd expect Rome to grant him a warrior's death. But Rome didn't fear his body. It feared his influence. And humiliation, displayed at scale, was stronger than any sword. If you believe that power can shape memory more brutally than violence, follow this thread. Because when Caesar finally brought Vercingetorix out of that pit, Rome didn't just kill a king, it rewrote his existence. You think death is the end of suffering, swift, decisive, a final boundary no empire can cross. But the truth is that Rome didn't settle for death. It sculpted it, refined it, turned it into a ritual where the goal wasn't to kill the body, but to unmake the person. And if that realization stirs something grim inside you, hold on to it. You're about to see exactly how Rome engineered the art of public degradation. March 7th, 203 CE. Carthage Amphitheater. A celebration of the emperor's birthday, meaning the crowd is large, loud, already half wild with anticipation. Perpetua and Felicity are brought and dressed as priestesses of Ceres, the very goddess whose worship they refused. This is the 60% history. The humiliation was intentional, symbolic, calculated. And yet, the crowd itself recoiled. Romans accustomed to blood, to beasts, to the machinery of death, shouted that it was too cruel. That's how precisely Rome had targeted its cruelty. Even the spectators recognized the insult beneath the execution. They were stripped of the costumes and given simple tunics. Rome adjusted the optics, not the outcome. Then came the cow. Not a lion, too swift. Not a bear, too masculine. A cow, chosen deliberately because Perpetua and Felicity were women. Rome believed even the animal should mock them. The cow charged. Perpetua was thrown into the air, her body hitting the ground with a crack sharp enough to ripple through the amphitheater. Blood filled her mouth. Dust clung to her skin. And yet, she stood, saw Felicity crushed beside her, went to her, lifted her up. Two women, beaten and trembling, choosing solidarity over terror. That's the part Rome never planned for. And here is the 40% Rome never documented. Imagine the silence that rippled through the crowd when Perpetua rose, spine straight, face bruised but unbroken. Imagine the confusion, the flicker of admiration, the brief fracture in the machinery of humiliation. Rome wanted her fear. She gave them defiance. The cow didn't kill them fast enough. Protocol resumed. They were led to the side gate where a young gladiator waited, hands shaking. His first strike missed her heart. She gasped, staggered, blood spilling from her ribs. Then, calmly, deliberately, Perpetua guided his sword to her throat. Even in death, she refused to let Rome choose the final movement. Meanwhile, across time and distance, September 46 BCE, another spectacle unfolded. Caesar's triumph. The most elaborate Rome had ever staged. Detailed wealth displays, floats of victories, sacrificial animals, and finally the prisoners. Vercingetorix, head shaved, clothes in rags, walked upright despite 6 years underground. Rome didn't parade him once. They stopped the procession so the crowd could mock him at multiple points, at the Senate, at the Forum, at Caesar's platform. He had to listen as Caesar rewrote the story of his rebellion into the story of Rome's destiny. And then, down the stone steps of the Tullianum, the same pit that held him. Only this time, he wouldn't climb back out. Strangled in darkness while the city feasted above. If you believe truth must be spoken even when it shakes you, let that belief anchor you here. Because this was not the end of suffering. It was the beginning of something far more disturbing. What happened next reveals how Rome used memory itself as a weapon. You think history preserves what matters, names, deeds, victories carved into stone. But the truth is that history remembers almost nothing on its own. What survives does so by accident, by politics, by someone deciding a story is worth keeping. And if that realization stings, good. Because the people Rome tried to erase are about to show you how fragile memory and humanity really are. Perpetua's story did not end in the amphitheater. Her diary survived, copied, studied, revered, Augustine quoted her. Medieval artists painted her. A young mother nursing an infant in a prison cell became one of Christianity's foundational martyrs. That's the 60% the record gives us. But here is the part history never tells. Her child. The sources go silent. A baby pulled from a dying mother's arms. Does he grow up knowing she chose faith over him? Does he survive infancy? Does he resent her? Or does he carry her name like a torch? The absence is its own kind of cruelty. Rome could kill a person, but only time can erase the echoes around them. Then there is Vercingetorix, the king reduced to a prop, the man whose death was choreographed for Caesar's glory. Rome buried him in darkness and buried his memory with him. For nearly 1,800 years, he was a footnote, hostis, enemy, erased from collective identity. That is the 60% Rome intended. But memory is disobedient. When France lay under occupation in the 1800s, historians unearthed his story. Suddenly, he wasn't a defeated barbarian. He was a patriot, a symbol, a unifier. Napoleon III raised a statue at Alesia, Vercingetorix towering above the battlefield where he surrendered to save his people. The inscription proclaimed unity, courage, nationhood. Rome's intended erasure became a legend Rome could never control. Yet the truth is darker. No monument changes the fact that the real man died strangled in a hole beneath the city he once threatened. And here is the 40% Rome never calculated. Humiliation has an afterlife. The spectacle ends. The crowd goes home. The bodies rot. But the stories, if they escape, can corrode empires more effectively than any rebellion. Perpetua's faith spread. Vercingetorix's defiance resurrected centuries later. Rome's machinery of degradation created exactly what it feared most: martyrs and myths. By now you might feel the shape of something unsettling. Rome didn't simply punish individuals. It engineered the memory of them, deciding who deserved to be forgotten, who could be repurposed, who should be remade into a cautionary tale. That is power far beyond swords or laws. That is control over meaning itself. And what comes next is the realization that Rome's machinery never truly disappeared. It only changed shape. You think Rome's brutality belongs to another age, dusty arenas, forgotten rituals, cruelty sealed safely behind museum glass. But the truth is that Rome never really vanished. Its methods simply learned new shapes, new technologies, new stages. And if that thought unsettles you, don't push it away. Discomfort is the only signal that we're still paying attention. Rome understood something profound and poisonous. Public humiliation is more powerful than private punishment. A person destroyed in silence disappears. A person destroyed in front of witnesses becomes a warning. The empire perfected this logic: amphitheaters, triumphs, ritualized degradation, because the spectacle multiplied suffering and converted it into control. That's the 60% history. Now look at the modern 40% Rome never could have imagined but would instantly recognize. We don't gather in stone arenas. We gather on screens. Billions of them. We don't crucify rebels along a road. We live stream their worst moments, share them, mock them, replay them until the person is no longer a person, just content. We don't parade prisoners in chains. We circulate mugshots, leaked messages, private failures, turning human collapse into entertainment. We don't force people into arenas. We design digital platforms where humiliation is monetized, where outrage pays better than truth, where algorithms amplify degradation because suffering keeps viewers engaged. Rome had 400 amphitheaters. We carry billions in our pockets. Rome reached millions. We reach billions. Contemporary trauma psychology confirms what Rome practiced. Public suffering fractures identity more deeply than physical pain. Forced performance, being watched, judged, mocked, intensifies the wound. And the presence of witnesses creates collective complicity, the same mechanism that once kept Roman crowds obedient. So ask yourself, are we really different? Or did we inherit Rome's machinery, polish it, digitize it, and convince ourselves that cruelty feels less cruel because no blood touches the ground? If you believe that facing this truth matters, even when it indicts the world we built, stay with the story. Because the final piece isn't about Rome's power. It's about what we choose to remember and what we let die in silence. You think power controls everything: flesh, law, destiny, even the terms of death itself. But the truth is that there is one force no empire, no system, no machinery has ever mastered: memory. Rome engineered humiliation with scientific precision. It crushed rebellions, erased names, rewrote identities. And yet, what survived were not its edicts, but the echoes of the people it tried to silence. If that realization feels heavy, let it. This weight is the reason their stories still breathe. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." Rome tried to script even the final thoughts of its victims, forcing them to die as lessons, as deterrents, as trophies. But memory belongs to whoever chooses to carry it. Not to emperors, not to crowds, not to the architecture of power. To us. This is the 60% history. Perpetua, age 22, guiding the sword to her throat because a trembling gladiator could not finish the task. Vercingetorix, age 30, walking upright through Rome after 6 years in darkness, dignity surviving where his body could not. 6,000 slaves along the Appian Way, anonymous, unrecorded, displayed as infrastructure. But the 40% is what we do with them now. Because remembering isn't passive. It is an act of rebellion, an act of restoration, an act that returns humanity to those Rome stripped bare. When you recall their stories, even for a moment, you perform the one ritual Rome could never legislate. You refuse erasure. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Systems of degradation never die. They mutate. They modernize. They find new screens, new audiences, new ways to turn suffering into spectacle. That's why memory matters. Not to glorify pain, but to recognize its patterns before they repeat themselves. If you believe these names deserve to echo one moment longer, if you believe history's darkest truths should not be buried for convenience, then carry them with you. Perpetua, the mother; Vercingetorix, the king; and the thousands whose names were taken before they could speak. By remembering them, you've undone what centuries of empire could not. You've given them back their humanity, if only for these few minutes.